All right, hello, and um, we're going to finish that last page of the review, and then I wanted to talk about the lab you have this week and what's going on next week. So today's review is about the math component of your midterm. So your midterm has really two parts to it. So your exam is Tuesday during this time, and I'll talk about that. The one, why don't we just talk about that to start with? Let me find my comments that I wrote out. So actually I have a whole bunch. Saturday your lab is due, and normally it's due Thursday, but this week and next week it's a little bit different, and that's because you have there's three parts to it, and the one's the 7-day challenge. So hopefully you're either done with it today or you'll be done with it Saturday. One is the leaf chromatography, and Araceli was here earlier and told me she actually tried it and she said it didn't work, and I wanted to, I think I have to do this different. Can you guys see the Google or no? You just see me? You see nothing?
I don't see Google.
Yeah, we have to go back to this. It's how the share screen works. But anyway, she said all she saw was greens and yellow. And so I was looking on Google at the pictures. The instructions I condensed down so it fit into one page, and it looks like, looking at pictures, that the reds and the orange, red, and purple, they actually go faster. So if you go the full 33 minutes, the orange, red, and yellows may actually run off the paper. So I know I said just run it for 33 minutes and go do something else. The actual instructions said to run it and keep an eye on it. And once the first colors start getting to the top of the paper towel, you want to stop it. And so my assumption is for her, the purple and reds and orange probably had all run off. So you probably don't want to run it for a full 33 minutes. You might want to check it after 10-15 minutes, and then after 20 minutes, and stop it there. And then the other thing was, yeah, and so just try the best. You should be able to see some colors. That's why I have the leaves in my hair, that I'm actually every morning go for a walk, and this is my favorite time because the leaves are so many colors. The first page is kind of like the review. It is more challenging questions, which should hopefully help you to solidify your understanding of the quantum stuff, which is on the midterm. And you can absolutely, we'll get done early today, so you can stay after and ask questions or come this evening. Or I do have an office hours Saturday morning at 10 a.m. The link is there. I'm going to warn you though, this Saturday, my other class has a huge assignment. It's your guys' assignment next week after the midterm. And so they will probably dominate my office hours. So don't let it intimidate you. If you come, just be patient, because I put them into rooms, which means I'm not out in the main room to answer the door every moment. So you might have to like sit in the waiting room. And the other thing, and I don't remember if I mentioned this class, if you do come on a Saturday for office hours, I'm actually in a class right before it that ends at 10, and I can't let you in until that class ends. So if you get there and you feel like you're waiting, just wait. I will let you in. All right. So if you have questions on the first page, the leaves, just have fun and make sure you're in the picture when you take your chromatography, and realizing it's probably not going to be, it actually online, it looks like they worked all right. You might, hopefully you can get the colors with that hint. I'm going to try it tomorrow. So we'll see. All right. So week 5 is next week. On Tuesday, I call it the celebration of learning instead of your exam, but if you want to say the word exam, you can say exam. So it will be listed as call 1, and we will be doing it during this class time at 10 o'clock. It is show your work. If you have a printer, you're going to get done probably faster. So even though it takes a minute to go and print it, I do compensate for that with the time. So you'll get extra time. For those of you who do not have a printer, you're going to just be looking at your computer screen and writing you don't need to write my questions out. You do need to write the answers, but it does take a little bit more time. Yeah, you have the thing that is due on Tuesday is your extra credit. And so I will be in my office hours beforehand. It is, the extra credit is a lot of the math, which we're going to go over, practice of that, because that's usually what students want practice of. And my other classes, they had their exams and they all did fine. Well, most of them did fine. The students who have been studying and really doing the work, they did fine. The people who were like, oh, I'm just going to use Google, it's obvious. And their answers were really bizarre because Google gives some really weird answers. So just study, just do the work, do the extra credit. The extra credit is actually due by 11:59 on Tuesday, because some of you are going to find when you take do the celebration of learning that, oh, maybe I want to do that extra credit now, because it's free points that are just added to your grade. Then the lecture, normally the exam's only an hour, but you're going to get like an hour and a half, because again, the students who have to write, look at the screen and write down, that takes time, as well as printing and scanning and sending it in. That's actually something that we need to talk about. Scanning. Some of you have to know how to scan as one file. And it really needs to be a PDF. So if you are still taking individual pictures, could you please, anybody who's listening to this, could you please send me an email? Tell me what type of phone you have, and I will send you a 2-minute video of how to make it into a PDF, because it will make your life much easier and mine. And I went through this with my other class. When you submit the exam, you can't leave until I can view it as one file, as a PDF. And so looking at your study sets this week, which were 3 pages, some of you are still sending me 3 different files. And so if you don't know, just send me an email saying, hey, I have an iPhone. Can you send me how to do it? On the iPhone, it's actually really simple. You have notes is one of the things that's already on your iPhone. And so you just save it into there and it makes it into one PDF. And I can send you the link of how to do it. It really takes a minute to learn how to do it. And on the Androids, you just have to download a free app. There's a whole bunch of them and they're pretty self-explanatory, but I have a 1-minute video of how to do that also, of how to use one of the apps. So there is already up on YouTube a Cat Eye on lecture. The notes are actually in your folder because there are some of you who like to get a step ahead, or you have more time. Like tomorrow is going to be kind of a rainy, cold. It's going to be a cold, rainy day tomorrow. And so if you want to take a step ahead, it's not on this exam, but it will help you. You can watch it, and there are notes, and that is what study set 4 is, which is next Thursday. So since the exam is Tuesday, the study set will be Thursday, and I'll videotape going over it, but that is due at 10 a.m. on Thursday, the study set, and there'll be a quiz also that's due by the 11:59 p.m. And then what we do the second half of Thursday, there's another video. You have to watch this one first. My other class, they're a week ahead of you. Some of them said they watched it 2 or 3 times because you want to feel comfortable with this to be able to do this next step. And that is what this first midterm or celebration is about. It's about the periodic table. It's about understanding atoms and electrons. And then we take the next step, like 2 days after the exam, and we start writing words, which is the chemical compounds. And so that's what nomenclature is. And that's what, it's a 1 hour, they're both like 50-minute lectures. Lab 5 is probably our most challenging lab. It's 4 pages of chemical compounds. You should all be able to get a 15 on it. You want to make sure, again, you're not just Googling answers. It is meant so you learn this, so you understand it, so you're efficient with it, and are ready to take the next step. So I'll have extra office hours next week to help you with that. And then there's also tutoring. Is there any questions about anything for us this week and next week? All right, so let's go ahead and review. So your exam it'll probably be half the atoms and electron stuff, and the other part is the math. And so your first quiz, go back into your quizzes, go back and redo your study sets, and go back and look through the notes. You can even rewatch the videos. You guys have a huge advantage in this environment because everything's taped, so you can go back. And my other class, there were a couple students who got like a 98%, and they all told me that they rewatched all the lectures, which there's not actually that much, but when they rewatched it, they said it filled in some of the gaps. It made a lot more sense because we keep building on it. And so the information from this, we just keep building on it. All right, so for number 1, A and B, you just had to punch it in your calculator. And again, that's why I have office hours. We'll get done early today. But when you punch A in, this is what your calculator gives you, is this crazy long answer. And so this is about using your calculator, but it's really about Sig Figs and units also. So on A, how many Sig Figs can that answer have? And why? When we're multiplying and dividing, we look for how many Sig Figs are in each of the factors. So my grams on top has 5 Sig Figs. This has 3. You guys remember counting Sig Figs? This has 4. And this number has only 2 Sig Figs. So the zeros on the left of the non-zero are not significant. They are important. They're placeholders. But we can only then have 2 Sig Figs in the answer. So 0.044 would be with the correct Sig Figs. Showing the 0 before the decimal, again, if you're going to pharmacy or nursing, they absolutely insist it has to be there. This would not get full credit because it does need to have units. And this is density. It's grams per cubic centimeter. The labs also. You might see a question from any of the labs, so make sure to go back and look at your post lab. You guys did great actually with the density lab, post lab, but looking at those, the math, that was a lot of practice. The second lab, first lab had the metric and some of the history stuff. You do not have to put it in scientific notation unless I tell you to, which I didn't. This is on the cusp. It's not that many zeros, but if you put it in scientific notation, it would be to the -2 because the number is less than 0. And then the unit goes after the scientific notation. All right, so 2 Sig Figs. This would be our Sig Figs, would just be 2. All right, the next one, when you punch it in your calculator, this is what you get. And if you gave me that answer, you would not get full credit. So one thing is it's missing the unit. So we'll put the unit on, grams. But this one, the Sig Figs. So let's walk through the Sig Figs. This has 4. When there's a decimal, the zeros after the decimal, after the non-zero, are significant. This has 5. They're showing you the precision of your measurement. And then this one has 7. Our answer is actually going to have 6. And it's not that you average these numbers. It has nothing to do when you add or subtract. It's not the number of Sig Figs. It is the place value. So this went to the 1,000th, or 3 decimal places. This went to the 100th, or 2 decimal places. And again, the 1,000th. So you can only be as precise as your least precise measurement. So 2 decimal places, you actually just add a 0. And so that would be the correct number of Sig Figs. If you changed it, let's say I ask you to change it to scientific notation, unless I said to round it, you would show the whole thing. This seems really silly. I would personally not put either of these in scientific notation unless you were asked to. but that would be 10 to the third. So it's not how many things you have. It's not 10 to the sixth. It's how many places the decimal moves. And your decimal moves 3 places. Correct scientific notation is 1 non-zero digit to the left of the decimal. All right. Any questions? That was from your first quiz. I actually have the first quiz to go over again because that's often many people's lowest quiz, even though, so I'd highly recommend going back and looking at your first quiz. Again, I can write on your stuff. Sometimes I put notes and sometimes I will write on it, but we'll actually go through it here just as practice. All right, these are factor label, and the mistake students will make, and I'm going to make the mistake here, so don't copy this down, is they just see the first piece of information given and they just automatically start there. That's not going to work out because the question wants us to find minutes, which is a time, and the seconds are in the denominator. So if you wanted to start here, you would want to start with it flipped over so the time was on top. So 1 second over 536 centimeters, but I'm not going to start there at all. When I give you more than one piece of information, I wrote the hint, start with the 1 unit, because we can flip the 2 units if we need to. So again, I do give you a grace right now, which is your labs. If you totally blew the second lab and either did not do it yet or got less than 12 points, you can resubmit it. Come to office hours and work it through with me so that you can do this, because we add to this with the periodic table in like 2 or 3 weeks. All right, we're at miles. How can you change miles to minutes? Is we need this other piece of information. I am not going to give you extra information. So as you use stuff, highlight or circle the information. As you use it, you can cross it out. And so the piece we need here is going to be centimeters. So the other thing that I want to remind you of and emphasize, because of the environment we're in, I do have that policy, and you will lose points if you use conversions other than the ones I give you. So you have to use these conversions. There are others, but which is wonderful. But I'm looking to see if you understand the process. I had a student in my other class. Every year there's somebody and they just struggle with this, but it's all in the units. So we pull the unit down, and if you look up here, we're trying to get to metric. I tell you how to go from miles to kilometers. In mine, the 1 goes with the miles, 1.609. You don't have to cancel your units, but if you're still struggling with this, cancel out your units. So I'd say about half of you have this, that you've got this flow beautifully. However, don't become cocky and just show up for the midterm. You want to practice, and that's what the extra credit gives you, more practice. And you can come early or stay after and check your extra credit before you submit it. All right, I'm going to get to centimeters. I do not recommend doing it in one step. Somebody have a question?
I lost my pet in July. My cat died.
That's
Right in front of me, too. I knew he was sick. I mean, he was having a heart problem. There was no medication available.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I have no idea who's talking, but I'm very sorry to hear that. Yeah. But he's moved on. He's done his quantum leap. So maybe that's why he did it in chemistry class. All right. So back to this. Everybody who's watching the video is going to be like, pause and be like, oh my goodness. So many blessings to your cat. Using the chart from the first lab, I recommend when you take the midterm, you have your periodic table ready and you have that chart from the first lab. And how that chart works is the 1 always goes with the metric prefix. So it's saying kilo K is equal to 10 to the third. Centi is equal to 10 to the negative 2. So if you're using the chart, that's how the chart works. If you're struggling with this, I recommend using the chart, because once you get the hang of it, or come to office hours and we can figure out how you can think about it. All right, so my kilo canceled, my meters canceled. There are some students, and again, having graded this from my other class, who said, hey, I'm smarter than that chart. I can do it in one step. And they all got it wrong, because it turns out when you're taking a test, especially at home where there's all these distractions that can happen, like just happened. All right, centimeters is going to pull down, and this is where I use this information. You can circle it in pink. That's going to pull down to here. The 536 is your centimeters, and then to 1 second. So whenever you have a slash, it's always per 1, and that's just the idea factor of these unit conversions, factor label. And then we want to get to minutes, so 60 seconds to 1 minute. Make sure your abbreviations also are standard. So miles, minutes, meters, all are M's. Sig Figs, the numbers I give you are the Sig Figs. So both numbers in the problem are measurements. So they have 3 Sig Figs. And then the conversions I give you between US and metric all have 4. So we go with the least number. And so I'm assuming my answers are right. I didn't punch these in again, but 15.7. If you ever do it where I give you the answers and you're not giving my answers, please let me know. All right, the next one is just metric conversions. So 1.11 times 10 to the 6. And per means over 1 centiliter. And just a reminder on the previous one, because it does drive some students crazy, to have that blank. If you're ending with 1 unit, which you do on number 2, or on number 4, then you're going to have a space where there's a blank, and you can draw a leaf in there, since leaves, right? That's kind of our theme for the week. All right. So writing down where you're going is really helpful. And again, my recommendation, you can do it in straight nanograms to milligrams. It often takes longer because you have to think more, but there's often 1 or 2 students who can do that and get it correct. So if you can do it and you always get it right, go for it. My recommendation is we change nanograms to grams and then grams to milligrams. And then we're going to do the same with the centiliters. So the centiliters will pull up here. We remove the prefix, and then centiliters would cancel. Now the liters will pull up, and I would change it to deciliters. And I know when I did this the very first week, a lot of people, everybody was pretty much staring at me, and several of you came to my office hours and you got it. And having done this with several thousand, 10,000 students, you all have the capability to get it. You just got to put the time in and take that deep breath and come to an office hour. It's really not that scary, especially when I look kind of ridiculous with my attempt at a leaf tiara. All right, the nano, the milli, the centi, the deci, they all get the number 1. And then you make this true. Nano is 10 to negative 9, milli is 10 to negative 3, centi is 10 to negative 2, and deci is 10 to negative 1. And then it's just a matter of putting it in your calculator, and there's our answer. All right, there's practice. There is other ways to do it. I, in the past, never gave out my answer key because the way I always showed it was not the way that I do it. And so, but there is, we are showing it in factor label. So whatever way you're showing it, and that means it's one flow. So you don't change the nanograms in one flow and then the centiliter in a different flow and then bring them together. That's going to lose at least half the points, probably more. All right, next one, also 2 pieces of information. So start with, I'm going to start with the kilograms because it has only one unit. I think I have 5 5s. And we're going to pints. So this is a density question because I'm going from mass to volume. Density for chemists is almost always in grams per milliliter or grams per cubic centimeter. So I'm going to get rid of my kilograms. It can also be kilograms per cubic meter is what physicists use because they're working with much bigger. They're talking about planets. Chemists are working with small amounts because they're developing things in labs. So kilo is, you can write 1,000 or 10 to the 3. And again, crossing out, you can draw a picture down here of whatever you're capable of. Now my density will come in and it flips upside down. So back to the density, the lab hopefully helped you feel more comfortable. Those post-lab questions are really important, so make sure you understand them, or come early on Tuesday, or stay after today and ask me. All right, now I have to get to pints. So I'm going from metric to US, and those are the bridges given up here. So we're going to use the liters and quarts. Again, having looked at my other class, the students either got it or they were all over the place. Like they were trying to change everything in one step. So just doing it systematically. I usually see this class that you guys, those of you who do get it, that you end up doing great with this. And then we can go liters to quarts. And a lot of you probably know these numbers because if you've been doing everything, you just keep using these same bridges. Just a reminder, the 1 is always with the US unit, and then the number is with the metric, and they all have 4 Sig Figs, so it just makes it less variations to deal with, like Google.
Is
Right,
that
and then
milliliter 10 to the negative third?
Yeah. Was that Christian?
Yeah.
All right. I'll add it to your, if you could see the board next to me, there's 8 names from last night. I just kept making mistakes left and right. So, yeah, but we were doing cation. So cats have 9 lives. So they say. All right. The question that came up, thank you, by the way. So yeah, you should have all caught that. Milliliters should be 10 to negative 3, and also be forgiving of yourself because we often make weird mistakes like that and it just happens. The US is always exact from the US to US, and question was, what are some of the ones you should know? I wrote them on the board. I can do it again, or just say them out loud. 2 pints to a quart, 4 quarts to a gallon. If there's a fluid ounces one, there's 32 fluid ounces in a quart, or I give a conversion that I want you to use. So if I'm giving conversions in the problem, I'm asking you to use those. I think the only other one, well, 12 inches in a foot. We run into that down here. All right, and then the metric to metric is also exact, so they don't limit our Sig Figs. The density is what limited us to 3 Sig Figs. And there we go. Be careful of rounding, and so hopefully I round it correctly. All right, the next one, we have 2 pieces of information, and they both have 2 units, so it doesn't matter which piece you start with. We're trying to get to decigram per second, so I'm going to go ahead and start with my grams. And again, I'm not going to give you extra information. So I'm going to change my grams to decigrams. And if you want to do 10 decigrams in a gram and you're comfortable with that, again, great. If you're using that chart, make sure you have that chart available for when you're taking the test. And yeah, it's 1 deci is 10 to negative 1. All right, that gets me my decigram. Now I have to change my milliliter to seconds. And so that means I have to get to gallons. So milliliters to liters. So milli is 10 to negative 3. And liters to quarts. And then 4 quarts in a gallon. All right, this one, quart is 0.9463. And you don't have to cross out your units, but it's really helpful because we're going from bottom to top. So when you're working with 2 units, which this question is, and same with number 3, it's really helpful to cross out units as you use them. And now I'm going to bring this piece of information in, and I don't have to flip it because the units work out. I recommend going back and doing this page. I recommend going back and like you can look at your notes. You don't have to reprint them, but you can, and just working through them so you feel comfortable with all the questions. All right, so that's gallons per hour because that's how the question was. We want to get to seconds. So you can go hours to minutes, minutes to seconds, or you can go hours straight to seconds. So 3,600, and we would punch it in. The density, again, limited us to 3 sig figs. This question used to be on the study set. I made your study sets a little bit smaller just because of the atmosphere we're in. But when it was on the study set, like half the class couldn't do it because we were still pretty new at this. So hopefully most of you can do it now. And if you're still struggling, keep practicing. And if you're not struggling, keep practicing because you don't want to get overconfident. All right, the next one. I have this one on here because it was something on the lab. I wrote a note to half of you. I don't care what this multiplied equals. I don't care what the volume is in cubic meters. What I was trying to say, you have to use my numbers in the show your work part, in the factor label. So you can either show each one in its own box, or in the first box, you can just write all of them. All right. Sorry, I was pondering if I'd given the bonus point about the 1.618. Did I ever give that question in here? I think I gave it to my other class. So if you watch this before the midterm, you want to email me and tell me what's so special. Did I do it about 1.618? No. I don't know if anybody's there. Nobody answers me. All right, that's cubic meters. So now I'm going to change meters. So the segue, there are other ones you can use. Is a cubic centimeter is a milliliter. That is going to be how we get out of the cubic and get to just milliliters. So yeah, you could go meters to feet and then cubic feet to gallons. That's great. But to get to gallons, I'm going to make you guys, that's using a conversion that we're going to use this one that's at the top of the page. And so again, you wouldn't get credit. You would get some credit, but you wouldn't get full credit because you didn't work it through showing all these pieces. So centimeters to meters, centi is 10 to the negative 2. You either have to do this step 3 times, which you can do, or you have to cube it. If it's a visual thing, and again, when I sat through that physics class for the whole year, Fausto, who's our physics teacher, who's phenomenal and brilliant, worked like at Stanford in the super collider there, or whatever it is, the linear accelerator, sorry. He always worked them out this way, where he visually would show all his steps like that. And so it's just a thing of how our brain sees 3 dimensions. All right, that gets us to centimeters. That's centimeters cubed. You could again have shown this as a centimeter is 10 to the negative 2 meters, but you have to cube all the parts. So you could do it as one step. This is a question, I can't remember now. I think it was Spencer I had a discussion with. You don't have to show this step also. But what I found is the students who do get it right, because, yeah, it's a visual thing. So this now cancels all my centimeters. My meters all canceled. So now I'm at milliliters. And from there, it's pretty straightforward. We would just do milliliters to liters, then liters to quarts, and then quarts to gallons. So it's all in the units canceling. And then the numbers just come along so that each piece holds true. So milli is 10 to negative 3. 1 quart, 0.9463. And then 4 quarts to a gallon. So if you got a comment like on your quiz that said your setup is okay, that means somehow how you're punching in your calculator. And then Sig Figs are determined by the 22.2 has only 3 Sig Figs. But that would be, this is what I mean by showing the dimensions, the length times the width times the height within the factor label. I never use my calculator until I get to the end, and then I hit enter. And there's different ways you can enter it in your calculator. Any questions with that? That's the review. I do want to go over the first quiz, because it was our first quiz. Again, when you do your lab, it's when you get to the 8th step. The 33 minutes is possibly too long because the reds and the orange and the purples will have left. All right. But I do want to go through your first quiz again, walk through it, because I want you all to get 100% on your exam so you feel comfortable and you're like, yes, I can do chemistry. This is also a reminder of physical and chemical. The first study set had physical and chemical. The only chemical, these were all P and these were all P, the only chemical was the reactivity. So the fact that something reacts or does not react. And in the first study set, there were some other words like oxidize or combust or neutralize that are words that tell you a chemical reaction happened. Taste, odor, those are physical properties. Now the act of tasting is chemical, but the actual taste of something, the fact that something is sweet, is just part of the physicality because it physically fits into a certain taste bud of your mouth. All right, so most things are physical. Look at your study set, you'll see that. Number 2, if you see multiple elements, that is a compound. If you have only one element, that is an element. And now we've worked with the elements more. That question shouldn't be too bad. And we'll be getting into compounds pretty heavily after the midterm. That's what the next midterm is about. So this one's about atoms and subatomic, what makes up atoms. And the next one's about compounds. And then the third midterm is we suddenly write sentences. So we'll do chemical reactions and then do the math with the chemical reactions. All right. So cookies are definitely a mixture. The chocolate chips would make it a heterogeneous. So looking at it, you can see the chips. And yeah, it's a real bummer because usually if we were in person, I always make treats for you guys for your exams. Pepitas are pumpkin seeds. And so I used to always make pumpkin cookies. And then different students in the class would also bring stuff at random times. So, all right, Sig Figs. We just went through this. On A, they are all significant. So that would be 7 because the decimals there, the zeros that come after the non-zero are significant. Go back and watch Tinkerbell talk about Sig Figs. It will probably make sense now that we've used them. Right, this one, the first zeros are not, so there are only 4 Sig Figs. And then scientific notation. There were 2 pieces here, and only some of you did this question completely right. I asked you to round to 3 Sig Figs and then show it in scientific notation. So you would have to round to 1.23. Scientific notation, one non-zero digit to the left of the decimal, and then times 10 to the fourth. So the decimal moves 4 places. It's not how many digits you have. And then the next one, neither of these actually rounded. They both just dropped what was after them, because the next digit would round down. And then you move the decimal 3 places, so 10 to -3. So about half of you got it correct, and about half of you did some weird stuff with it. And so make sure also that you read on the celebration of learning. Again, I'm going to call it a celebration of learning because the word exams makes people do funky stuff. But make sure you read what I'm asking on that question. All right. And then this was just punching in your calculator. So for the first one, there was a typo, and you guys were new to me. So this was supposed to say centimeters. And so what happened was about half of you didn't even notice that and just assumed it was centimeters. And if you did it as centimeters and just added them up, you get 37.805. But for Sig Figs, you could only go 2 decimal places. So it does have to round, and it does round up, because that's what happens with 5s. So it would have rounded up to 37.81 centimeters. And then half of you said, no, that's decimeters. And we just did this whole thing with the first lab with metric. So she wants me to change it to centimeters. And you actually took my decimeter and changed it, which was beautiful, to 282.5 centimeters. And again, it wasn't one of you, it was a handful of you. And then you would add them up and you get this number, which is like 292. The Sig Figs can only go to 1 decimal place, because when you move that over, so you would end up with 292.1. It also rounds up centimeters. All right, on B, you punch it in, you get this crazy number. And some of you gave me this as your answer, and that's wonderful, but that's not respecting Sig Figs. It also doesn't have a unit. And if you have that many zeros, where your teacher is there looking at a screen and having to count to make sure you're the right zeros, means you needed to be in scientific notation. So really, once you get like this, these guys should be, this one's right on the cusp. So exponents, once we get to exponents of 4, 5, 6, you definitely need to be in scientific notation. Exponents of 3, -3, you're right on the cusp. So scientific notation, and 3 Sig Figs, because these each had 3. So 5.71, and then times 10 to -5. And then units. The meters on the bottom would reduce one of those, so it would just be just meters. The other quick comment is, in this environment of me trying to grade looking at a computer screen for hours, I sometimes miss a piece of information. And so, yeah, if I didn't mark it wrong or something, just make sure. That's why I'm going through this. There was a lot of detail with this quiz. There was also a question that somebody had asked me when we did the study set. And they said, well, they do this as they change it to 321 and then times 0.000987765 and then divide by 5550. And I said, that's great. That's actually how I do it often in my calculator. But when you do the Sig Figs, you have to go back to my numbers. And so this does limit us to 3 Sig Figs. All right, this one we divide by the 6.325. And you are going to be limited to 3 Sig Figs. So even though your calculator will give you 8 or more Sig Figs, those would be our 3 Sig Figs. No scientific notation. The next digit's 8, so we have to round up to 8.46. And one dimension cancels, so we'd be at centimeters squared, or area. So area times length would give us volume. Questions? All right, we can look at the last one. Just putting them in order. So the negative exponents are going to be our smallest. So from smallest, the 10 to the negative 3. So 1. We're starting down here, 1.8 e to negative 3. That would be our smallest. This would be our next smallest, so 0.0068. And then the 2.9 e to the negative 2. And then for the large one, some of you actually changed it to longhand notation. A reminder, scientific notation, you can also use the capital E, which is fine. And so the 1.5 would be our fourth one, and then the largest was the 250. So, yeah. You could change them all to longhand notation, and that makes it easier to see from smallest to largest. The other quick comment is if you ever see a question like that again, you could number. There was somebody who had their numbers, but they had them exactly reversed. And I did specify from smallest to largest. So if you want to be clear how you're doing it, you should write a note or label like I did here, that I'm going from smallest to largest, so that I can clearly see that you understand the concept. All right, questions? I'm going to stop recording. So study for the midterm. I'll be in my office hours Tuesday morning, and I'll stay here now until noon if anybody has questions. And